What if I told you that a man once born into unimaginable privilege, a man raised in castles, guarded by centuries of tradition, adored by millions, could now be facing the cold, steel bars of a prison cell, with his own father watching silently from his throne? Because that's where we begin. A former prince, stripped of protection, abandoned by the crown, now drowning in debt, allegations, and legal chaos, has only one person who could save him: King Charles III, his father, the monarch. The only man with the power to wire $100 million and make it all go away. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But King Charles didn't save him. He refused the call. Not only that, he allegedly blocked all contact. No phone calls, no visits, no royal lifeline, just silence. And now, the youngest son of the late Princess Diana might be headed for the one place no royal has ever dared go: a maximum security prison. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the crumbling end of a dynasty's most rebellious chapter. And it's happening right now. So the question is, how did we get here? What went so horribly wrong between father and son that a monarch would watch his child spiral without lifting a finger? And even more shocking, what secrets are being hidden behind palace walls that made Charles choose betrayal over blood? Because here's the part no one's talking about. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about something darker, buried in a web of leaked financial documents, sealed legal orders, and one scandal too massive to cover up anymore. But before we uncover that final truth, let's rewind the clock. Let's go back, not to the golden years of royal bliss, but to the moment Prince Harry started his slow, unstoppable collapse. Because this isn't just about the $100 million. This is about what happens when the prodigal son asks for help, and the crown slams the door in his face. Let's dig in. In the beginning, the world saw him as the charming rogue, the cheeky royal who didn't quite fit in. He had a laugh that made front pages, a temper that made headlines, and a tragic backstory that bought him endless sympathy. He was the spare, but also the spark. But over the years, that spark became a wildfire. And when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle famously walked away from royal duties in 2020, the public was divided. Some cheered for freedom. Others saw betrayal. Yet even in exile, Harry still had the aura of royalty. He still had his title, his charities, his memoirs, his Netflix deals, his global brand. But what happens when the brand collapses? When the money runs dry, the deals fall through, and the walls start closing in. Here's the first thing they won't tell you. Behind the lavish Montecito mansion and carefully staged Netflix documentaries, Harry and Meghan were allegedly swimming in debt. Court whispers suggest unpaid bills, failed ventures, massive security costs, legal fees, tax complications in multiple countries, burned bridges with former partners. And now, according to leaked legal documents, an alleged demand for a $100 million bailout to avoid total ruin. But that's not even the real story. The real story is what happened when Harry called his father. Imagine it. A grown man, once second in line to the British throne, forced to swallow his pride, pick up the phone, and beg the very institution he once accused of racism, neglect, and cruelty for money. Now here's where it gets painful. King Charles didn't even answer. That's right. According to palace insiders, the call went straight to voicemail and was never returned. The future king ignored his son's cry for help. And then he went a step further. He blocked all future contact. All of it. Sources say Harry's private line to Charles's royal office was cut. No forwarding assistant. No palace liaison. Even Prince William allegedly distanced himself further, reinforcing what some are calling a total blackout. So ask yourself, what kind of father does that? And then ask, what kind of son forces him to? Because we're not talking about a simple family rift. We're talking about a complete, calculated severing of ties. And it all leads to one chilling outcome. Harry standing alone, under investigation, with no funds left and no royal protection. But why did Charles cut him off now? Why this moment? What pushed the king to turn his back on his own blood? Let me take you inside what sources claim happened in the lead-up to this crisis. Just a few months ago, Prince Harry allegedly received word that multiple lawsuits were lining up against him. Civil cases, contract disputes, even whispers of tax fraud tied to an American foundation. Some say his name appeared in sealed filings connected to undisclosed financial activities. Others say it had to do with private security services he allegedly failed to pay, or properties leased under shell companies linked to Sussex-branded ventures that never turned a profit. One palace aide allegedly described it as a financial ticking time bomb, and Harry knew it. According to reports, the $100 million wasn't about buying luxury. It was about buying freedom, avoiding charges, keeping appearances, silencing lawsuits. So he turned to the only person who could cover it all with a single transaction. But Charles said no. And when asked why, one senior royal insider simply said, "It's about the institution now, not the individual." Translation: the crown comes first, even if it means letting your own son crash into rock bottom, alone. And maybe Charles has his reasons. After all, Harry's tell-all memoir Spare dragged the royal family through the mud. The Netflix series accused them of systemic racism. The Oprah interview blindsided the world. Meghan compared royal life to being silenced, trapped. Harry compared his family to villains. So maybe Charles saw this as justice, as karma. But here's the twist. Despite the global sympathy Harry once enjoyed, public opinion has shifted. Royal fans once camped outside in support now flood comment sections with rage. He wanted out. Let him stay out. You left. Don't come crawling back. And even longtime Sussex defenders are asking the hard question. Is this still about healing, or is it about money? But for Charles, it's about something else entirely. Loyalty, or the lack of it. He reportedly told close aides, he burned every bridge. Every one. And now he wants to walk back across the ashes. To some, that sounds cold. Heartless. But to a king, it sounds like survival. Because according to leaked briefings from royal advisors, the monarchy's future is at a fragile tipping point. One more scandal, one more $100 million scandal, and the entire institution could be at risk. So Charles made his decision. No funds, no favors, no contact. And now, Prince Harry faces the biggest fall from grace in modern royal history. But here's the most disturbing part. This might not be the end. Because what happens when a man is desperate? When he's pushed to the edge? When his own family blocks his calls and his bank accounts are frozen? What does he do? Where does he go? And what does he reveal? Because Harry isn't just broke. He's dangerous. He knows things. He has files, photos, letters, messages, secrets that could burn the whole house down. And some say he's ready to use them. So now the royal family faces a terrifying dilemma. Pay the price or face the exposure. But King Charles? He's called Harry's bluff. And what comes next could destroy everything. Because Harry isn't staying quiet. And the clock is ticking, faster than anyone expected. What happens when a prince is cornered? We're about to find out. But first, let me take you to the moment it all unraveled. The call that was never answered, the plea that was ignored, and the threat that followed. Because after the silence came the rage. And what Harry did next was the moment Charles knew. This war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Have you ever called someone knowing, deep down, that if they don't answer, your life might collapse? Not metaphorically, not emotionally, literally collapse. That was Prince Harry on that call. Not the smiling red-haired royal from balcony waves and military parades. Not the cheeky younger brother playing second fiddle to a future king. This was a man pacing, sweating, voice tight, breath shallow. A man with lawyers waiting, bills stacking, deadlines closing in. A man who knew that if the next 10 minutes went wrong, everything he'd built since leaving the royal family would disintegrate in real time. So he did the one thing he swore he'd never do again. He called his father. And what happened next still echoes through palace corridors and whispers. Because that call, it was never answered. Here's what sources close to the palace claim happened. It was late evening in California, early morning in London. The kind of hour that tells you something is wrong before the phone even rings. Harry had already spoken to his legal team. Not once, not twice, several times. The message was clear. Time was up. A civil case was advancing faster than expected. A financial disclosure deadline loomed. There were penalties, severe ones, and the numbers were staggering. We're not talking about a few million. We're talking about some so large they could bankrupt a mid-sized company, let alone a couple whose income had slowed to a trickle. So Harry did what any desperate son would do. He reached out. Not through aides. Not through lawyers. Directly. He called the private number. The one he'd been told was always there. The one reserved for family. The one that, for decades, had symbolized something sacred. No matter what happened, blood came first. The phone rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. Voicemail. And that voicemail? According to insiders who later heard about it, it wasn't angry. It wasn't threatening. It was worse. It was pleading. Harry's voice reportedly cracked halfway through the message. He didn't lead with money. He didn't even lead with the problem. He led with regret. He talked about Diana. About mistakes. About wanting to fix things. Then, only then, did he mention the crisis. The urgency. The scale. And finally, the ask. Help me. Just this once. Silence followed. Minutes passed. Then hours. Then an entire day. No callback. No text. No acknowledgement. And that's when the reality hit. The king wasn't just unavailable. He was refusing. Let's pause right there. Because this is where the story stops being about royalty and starts being about something painfully human. Rejection. Not public rejection. Not tabloid rejection. But the kind that cuts deepest. The kind that comes from the one person you thought would never shut you out completely. Imagine it. You're facing the biggest crisis of your life. You swallow your pride. You reach out. And you're met with silence so loud it feels intentional. So what do you do next? Most people would spiral. Harry did something else. He tried again. This time, the call didn't go directly to Charles. It went through the system. The royal system. Private secretaries. Encrypted lines. Assistants trained to say everything without saying anything. And that's where the tone shifted. Harry wasn't speaking to a father anymore. He was speaking to the institution. And the institution was cold. According to sources, Harry was told the king was unavailable. Not busy. Not traveling. Unavailable. That word matters. Unavailable doesn't mean can't. It means won't. And then came the next blow. Harry was informed, politely, clinically, that any future communication would need to be routed through legal channels. Legal. Not familial. Not personal. Legal. In other words, you are no longer calling as a son. You are calling as a liability. And just like that, the door closed. Now here's where the story takes a darker turn. Because it wasn't just that Charles didn't answer. It was what happened behind the scenes after that voicemail was received. Sources claim that within hours, senior advisors were briefed. Security logs were reviewed. Communications protocols were adjusted. And a quiet but firm decision was made. All direct contact would be suspended. Not temporarily. Indefinitely. The reason given internally? Risk. Risk to the crown. Risk to the monarchy. Risk to the king. Harry's name, once spoken with affection in palace halls, was now spoken with caution. Even fear. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why would a single phone call trigger such an extreme response? Unless the problem Harry was facing wasn't just financial. Unless the stakes were far higher than anyone outside the palace realized. Let's talk about what Harry was really calling about. Because the $100 million figure didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't arbitrary. It was calculated. That number represented coverage. Coverage for lawsuits. Coverage for settlements. Coverage for penalties. Coverage for silence. Because once legal machinery starts moving, it doesn't stop politely. It grinds. And it exposes. And Harry knew that if this went public, if filings became records, if testimonies became headlines, the damage wouldn't stop with him. It would reach back across the Atlantic. Into the monarchy. Into Charles's reign. Into everything the crown had worked so hard to stabilize since Queen Elizabeth's death. And that's where things get complicated. Because from Charles's perspective, answering that call wasn't an act of love. It was an act of complicity. And complicity, for a king, can be fatal. According to insiders, Charles didn't listen to the voicemail alone. He had advisors present. Legal counsel. Security officials. People whose job it is to think 10 steps ahead. And after hearing the message, the room reportedly went quiet. Not emotional. Strategic. The kind of silence that signals calculation. Because one question hung in the air. If we help him, what does it cost us? Not in money. In credibility. In authority. In survival. Charles had spent years repairing an image damaged by scandal, divorce, and decades of public skepticism. He had just ascended the throne. The world was watching. And now his son, the same son who publicly accused the institution of cruelty, was asking for a 9-figure rescue. So Charles did what monarchs are trained to do. He thought long-term, and in doing so, he made a choice that would shatter a family. But Harry didn't know all of that. All he knew was that the phone stayed silent. And silence breeds panic. According to people close to the Sussex camp, Harry didn't sleep that night. He paced, replayed the message in his head, wondered if he'd said the wrong thing, or not enough, or too much. By morning, the desperation turned to disbelief, then anger, because in Harry's mind, this wasn't just rejection. It was punishment. And punishment, when you feel cornered, does something dangerous. It hardens you. Here's something that rarely gets discussed. Harry didn't just leave the royal family physically.